welcome to my channel. My name is Belinda. If it's your first time here, welcome. Show this video some love by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hit the notification bell button so that you can also get to know when I put up new content, which is every other week during the weekends. So without further ado, this video is a two-part video. It's a lovely collaboration between myself and a lovely friend of mine from uni, Runako. When you're done with this video, please head over to her channel to watch part 2 because, as you know, student accommodation, which is the topic for today, it's quite a broad topic, but we've tried our best to consolidate all the information that we have into a two-part video. So this video will be all about general tips that you should consider, all the information and basics about student accommodation, and then in part 2, which will be on Runako's channel, we're going to cover our specifics from our own experience because I went to University of Manchester, she did as well, and she's currently doing Bachelor of Medicine at UCLA and UCLan actually. Sorry, I said that wrong. UCLan, University of Central Lancashire. So definitely head on over to her channel after this video to see part 2 of the accommodation video. So, student accommodation. If you've stayed up to this part of this video, it means you're definitely interested in finding out more about university student accommodation. So there are mainly two types of accommodation. Of course, all these experiences are from the UK. We've studied in the UK, so we're only giving examples from the UK. So it's mainly two forms of accommodation, and that's uni-owned halls of residence or houses. There's some universities which actually own houses, student houses, and there's the private-owned accommodation. So you can choose to go through the uni-owned route or private accommodation. So I'll walk you through the uni-owned halls of residence, which tend to be the most popular choice when it's your first time moving to a completely different country. So university halls of residence, there are different types. Okay, so some of the factors that determine the type of hall that you end up in, or the ones you actually select in your application, is things like what type of student are you? So your university, when you're applying for accommodation, some of the questions they'll ask you to fill in the form is what type of student you are. Postgrad, or are you an undergrad student? Reason for this is they'll probably want to match you with someone closest, or like who you'd probably have the same interests, like you'd have common interests. So in UK, you all get your own room. So I've not come across a university where you share a room. I think that would probably be the case in London, but it's very rare. So you'd have your own room, but then you'd share the common places. So things like the kitchen, things like the lounge area, and for some accommodations, bathrooms as well. But basically you have your own room with a study desk. So they all have the same setup. It would be a study desk, a single bed, but if you pay more, you can get a double bed. But most of the time it's a single bed. Some accommodation, they'll make sure you have a sink if you have shared bathrooms, but you have at least a sink. So you didn't have to go there to brush your teeth. You can brush your teeth from your own bedroom. And then you'd share a big kitchen. So depending on how many people you are on the floor, if it's 5 people, you'd have a smaller kitchen. If it's 10 people, you'd have a kitchen that can fit 10 people. So that's how they tend to be set up. So some of the questions they'll ask you is what type of student you are, just so that the other people that you're put with in the same flat are people that you're most likely going to be doing either similar course or similar levels. So if you're all first year students, you'd be put with first year students. Another thing that they would ask you to fill in, a preference, is if you want self-catered or catered accommodation. So self-catered is where you cook for yourself, and it's the option I went for because I didn't know what is on the menu, and I didn't imagine being stuck on that menu that I don't like for a whole year. So if you get to, there's some people who, especially if they're from this country, so the people who live in the UK, you have the chance to go for accommodation open days. So you get to see the different types of accommodation. And I guess at that moment is when you can ask what the menu is. What are the things that you typically eat if you are in a catered accommodation? But if you don't like cooking, there is an option for you. You can go for catered accommodation. The only thing you need to remember is if it's catered, the meal times are set. So if you wake up late, you've missed breakfast. So just know they have set meal times, and when you miss them, that's it. But some universities, it's worth saying that some universities have a different setup for catered, where you get a card. In your student card, you're loaded with credit. So they load your card with credit and you can use it at any of the restaurants. So that wasn't the setup in my uni. I was in the University of Manchester, but in some other universities, I think Leeds, that's how it is. They give you credit and then you can use it in your own time at any of the student restaurants. Another option is, do you want an ensuite room or do you want shared bathrooms? So personally, when I started, I went for the cheapest option, just because, you know, you check Kenyan shilling versus pound and you see this much for a room, because they tend to give the rate per week. So they'll tell you, if you go for this type of accommodation, it's £90 a week. So based on what you choose, it determines the cost. So the cheaper, the less. So if it's catered, of course, it's more expensive. If it's ensuite, it's more expensive. So these are things you need to consider. So another thing you might want to check is, actually there's studio flats as well. So it's not just ensuite and shared bathroom. You can also want your own kitchen. So it depends, the level of sharing. The more they're sharing, the cheaper. The less they're sharing, the more expensive it is. Another factor that you need to consider, and they ask you when you're selecting accommodation, is the distance. So there are some universities, based on how they're set up, the halls of residence could be in different locations. So in University of Manchester, for example, there is the halls that were closest to the uni. Then there are some that are a certain distance away, and there are some which are farthest away. Again, that affects how much they cost, because the ones right in city center where the university was were more expensive, and that's the one I chose because I was coming from a completely different continent and I didn't want to have to learn how to navigate to uni. I wanted a case where literally I can just wear my clothes, go downstairs, cross the road, and I'm in uni. And that was the case. So you may be wondering, what are the pros and cons? So some of the pros are the fact that when you pay that cost, whatever it is, that's it. There are no hidden costs, there are no extra utilities that you need to pay for. It's one cost that meets all the different things that you need to stay at that in that accommodation. So things like internet, things like water, things like heating, things like TV license. No, I'm not, let me not say TV license, I'm not too sure on that, but I did stay in an accommodation where TV license was included. But yeah, basically the bills tend to meet, the cost you pay tends to meet all the bills of staying in that accommodation, except things like groceries. But all other fixed costs are usually included, and that's something you might not want to have to worry about, especially when you're adjusting to a whole new country. So that's something you might want to consider. Another pro is that most of the time, most of these halls are close to uni. That's why they're uni halls of residence. You may go to a private accommodation that's so far away, and just the journey of getting into uni is just a headache. So some of the pros is that most of the halls of residence are usually quite close to uni, and they're very close to most likely like a bus stop or a way for you to get to uni, because that's the whole point of them being student halls of residence. Another benefit is most uni halls don't need a guarantor. Because it's a uni hall, they know that you're an international student. They probably know when you're paying your fees, if you're paying in installments or whatever the case. So they don't need a guarantor as much as private accommodation. So private accommodation, they'd probably want someone close to you, maybe a relative, family member, whoever you identify as your guarantor, to earn over a certain amount, and they need to see that proof. And imagine you're completely new to a country and you're trying to find someone who earns in pounds to guarantee you, yet they don't know you, and then you have to ask for their salary details. It's just a headache that you might not want to deal with in your first year of university. Also, unit accommodation, some universities, at least I can definitely say for University of Manchester, they guarantee you accommodation for at least your first year if you're from UK, or for the whole duration of your course if you're international student. So you know, as long as you've applied before the deadline, you're definitely going to find a place. Another benefit is the social element. How could I forget the social element? In fact, this is the most important one. Most people, when they're going to uni, they leave their family. It's their first time away from home, first time that they're venturing out on their own. And the fact that you're going to be in a building full of other students just like you who are completely brand new in this uni, it's just good. Like, especially I remember when I was in uni, there was this Freshers Week, and basically in my hall they had events from Monday to Saturday. Like, literally we'd all meet downstairs at a specific time, knowing that we're going out, and we come back together, especially when you're in the same flat and you just click. So it's just that social element that you probably miss out on when you go and stay in private accommodation, where it could be anyone. The next person next door could be someone who works in IT. The other person next door could be a retired person. So literally, because the residence you're staying in is not just students, it's a mixture of everyone, you may miss out on that social element of, you know, going out, meeting new students who are literally in the same position as you, starting off their uni journey. So the social element is, I think, a big plus. Another benefit is that the contract, so the accommodation contract, or the length of stay for university halls usually aligns with the academic year. So in the UK, the academic year tends to be from September to June. Then there is long holidays and people come back in September. So that June to September period, you're not required to pay any rent unless you choose to. It's optional. However, when you go for private accommodation, something you need to consider is the contract you get into. How long is it for? Because most landlords want you to get into a 1-year contract. It's if you literally go the proper private route, because I know there are private halls which again would probably align with academic dates. But if you go for literally an apartment, a completely separate apartment, not a student apartment, you're just renting a normal apartment, most landlords tend to want you to get into a 1-year contract. And that's something you need to remember. Are you going to be here during the summer? Are you going to be here during the long holidays? If so, then that's not a problem for you. But if you'll be traveling back home, then you need to know about, you need to consider that you might be paying rent when you're not even staying there. So some of the cons is that private student accommodation owned by the uni tends to be more expensive than private accommodation. It's just what you get, basically the value for money, what you're getting, the size of the room, the size of the bed. It honestly tends to be more expensive than private. If you were to pay the same amount in a private, for a private place, private flat, house share, you'd probably get more for your money. So that's another con, but it's something that I guess peace of mind versus how much it costs, it's something you'll just have to do a cost benefit analysis and see what's best for you. Another con is student halls tend to be quite noisy. So if you're a post-grad student, I'm pretty sure you don't want to be near some first years who are literally enjoying their life and you're trying to write your dissertation or whatever, you know, serious thing that you're doing in your masters. So depending on what stage you are in your life, maybe student halls are not for you, or maybe they're for you. So that's just something that you need to consider. Another con is that the rooms tend to be very standard. Literally, it will be a bed. Some may even be tiny. Some rooms may be tiny. It's a bed, sink there, study desk, literally very basic facilities. Very decent, but basic. So the luxury aspect, just take it out. Like, I remember the first night I stayed in my hostel and I'd never slept in such a small bed in my life. Okay, maybe not in my life, but in a long time I hadn't slept in such a small bed. Literally, you stretch your leg like this and you're already out of your bed. So, you know, that's something that you need to be ready for. So, you know, when you're going for this, it's most likely very standard kind of accommodation. Don't get me wrong though, if you're willing to add a few more coins to that, rent per week, you can find luxurious student accommodation owned by the uni. It's just something that you need to be willing to spend more money for. Another con is, for most unis, you probably have no control over who you've been allocated to share the flat with. You could be allocated to a very nice group of people. You could be allocated to a group of people who are just completely rowdy, every single day want a party. Another time you could be allocated to people who just don't know how to clean dishes. Like literally them and clean dishes are miles apart. You can really tell which one I'm very passionate about. People who don't wash dishes, because that was something I dealt with for a whole year. Yeah, so that's another con. Another con is you may probably have to move over the holidays. You have to move out because again, they align with the academic year. So during the summer, you have to know where you're going to put your things, because I've not come across a uni yet where you can reserve a room for over 2 years, because most of the time you have to move out, and then again when it's the academic year starts, you move into, if it's the same hall or a different hall. But it's unlikely you'll keep the same room for the full period of your study. You'll probably have to keep moving in, moving out every holiday. Anyway, that brings me to the end of this part. Runako is going to walk you through private accommodation, the things you need to know about, some tips and some pros and cons. Hope you enjoyed this part.
Hi guys, welcome to the second part of this video on accommodation. So I'm just going to be talking about private accommodation. So who am I? My name is Runako, Chadz and I, or Ru or Runi. Literally, I've got so many names. I practically answer to almost everything. I am a 4th year medical student in Preston. So you might be wondering how I know Soni. So Soni and I went to the same school in Kenya, and then we went to the same university in Manchester, and then we decided to start this YouTube journey at around the same time. All of these things were all coincidences as well, but good coincidences nonetheless. But anyway, so yeah, here we are. So like I said, I'm going to be talking about private accommodation. So the different types of private accommodations. First of all, you've got private halls. So private halls are basically uni halls, but they're not owned by the university. So they're owned by a different letting company. And basically with private halls, the good thing is if you've got a group of friends, you can literally ask the office to put you all in the same flat, because they're usually really accommodating. This is very different to uni halls, where they just put you in a random place. Like, I don't know what algorithm they use, but you could literally end up anywhere. You don't get to choose your flatmates. But you know what? Saying that might be a bad thing. But to be honest, when I went to Manchester my first year, I stayed in uni halls and I got really random people, and honestly, we've become the closest of friends. 7 years on, we're still friends. We still meet up, and they're like my bestest friends in the UK. So I guess that's a pro for uni halls, because your friendship group is diversified. So I would recommend moving to private halls in your second year, to be honest, but that's my own preference. In addition to that, another pro of living in private halls is that there's usually staff on site. So different private halls act differently. So some of them, they staff 24/7. Some of them, they staff just on weekdays, and then there's no one on weekends. But that's not really a problem, because if you have any maintenance issues, there's always someone who you can go to, a number you can call, and they'll come quick and sort out something. So you're never really alone, in a sense. Like, there's always someone who's there to help you, if that makes sense. In addition to that, because there's stuff on deck all the time, when you've got a parcel or something that needs to be signed off during the weekday when you're in university or whatever, there's always someone that's there to sign it for you. So all you have to do when you come from university is, you just pick up your parcel and you go straight to your room. You don't have to have the stress of oh gosh, there's a parcel, you're getting those notifications from Amazon or a DHL, like, oh, your parcel, someone's one stop away and you're in a class. And then, you know, you get a letter when you get home and they're like, oh, come pick it up at the depot. There's always someone. So I guess that's like a very good thing about private halls. So the different rooms when it comes to private accommodation. So there's the ensuite, there's the ones where you share the bathrooms, and then there's studio apartments as well. So a studio apartment is basically a self-contained room. That's putting it in simpler terms. So you've got your kitchen, you've got your bed, and you've got your bathroom all in one place. So it's like a room. I'll be showing you an example of a studio in the second part of this video. So yeah, stay tuned, guys. So the other type of accommodation that you can have is a room share. So room shares, to me, it's a very interesting concept, but like from the research that I've done, it's probably the cheapest option. So room shares are when you, like, someone owns a house and then they rent out a room on, like, maybe Rightmove. Rightmove is like a website where you can, so Rightmove is a website that you can use when you want to look for houses to rent. So yeah, so someone puts their room to be rented and then you basically rent that room. Obviously you can use the rest of the house, you know. It could be, you know, I don't know, a family. It could be, you know, some woman or some guy. It could be anyone, really. I feel like there's a lack of privacy, especially if the person's house that you're living in is so much older than you, or they work, or they have a family. It's just one of those things where it's like, ooh, you know, no. On the other side, room shares can also be, let's say an example is, let's say my friends and I, we've got a 5-bedroom house, but we're only 4 friends and we need someone to pay for the last room. And then we could put that room also on rent. So we're all in the contract, maybe we're all students and we just want another person. I mean, the con could be, you know, you'd be looking at, oh, I'm staying with strangers, I don't know who these people are, you know, that kind of thing. But you know what, at the same time, you know, you can equally meet very amazing people, get into that social group, so you're also getting friends. It will end up being like you and your friends decided to flat share, which is like sharing a flat basically. But the thing with those houses is, you know, like I talked about the bills when it came to like private halls. And with most of them, you probably have to now start doing your own bills. So you have to think of electricity, gas, water, you know, Wi-Fi, all those things. And when it comes to my parents, like my parents are those people that when it comes to accommodation, if you tell them, oh, I have to pay 500 a month, and then now you say Wi-Fi is £22, water is £50, you know, all these things are like, they'll feel so overwhelmed. They'll feel like you're saying a big sum of money. Like they would rather have a constant amount that they pay all the time. But that's my parents. So you have to pay bills separately. But I actually didn't know this, but there are companies that help out with this whole bill situation. So some companies, you know, compile the whole bills expense. So they'll be like water, electricity, gas, you know, all the bills that you have to pay. They'll have the different companies that they work with, and then they split those bills amongst everyone in the house. So if you have a 4-bedroom house, they might tell you that each person for bills has to pay, you know, for example, £20 each, something like that. So everyone has to pay £20 each. And I think that's so much better, especially for me, where I'm a bit skeptical about other people. At least in this case, you know, you pay for your bills and that's it. But, you know, if you have someone who likes to take baths and, you know, your water bill goes up, I guess there might be some friction, you know, if you don't know how to tell your friends. But, you know, that's a whole different story. In addition, like I already said, you know, like postage, like, you know, if you're not at home, and no one else is at home, you know, you run into that risk of like someone, like a postman coming to deliver your post and you're not at home, and then you have to go pick it up at the depot, or you have to constantly be rescheduling when to deliver your post. I mean, I find this as a problem, especially, you know, being in medicine, especially in fourth year, because I'm never at home. So staying in a house for me is something that I don't like to do, because I really don't like going to like look for posts. There's a reason why I'm ordering things to my house in the first place, because I don't want to leave the house. So there's no point of now me going to the post office, because I might as well go and do my shopping in town. You get what I mean? In conclusion, private housing really gives you that taste of being grown, because to be honest, even though I complain about the whole postage thing, I guess that's just the reality of life. That's how life is going to have to be for the rest of my life. So it really gives you a sense of like, ooh, I'm grown, I'm taking responsibility of everything. Anyway, the other thing about private housing is you really have to look up your agencies, because, you know, do your research, because you never know who it is you're signing a contract in. Some people really tie you into their contracts, or, you know, if you don't really read, there's some fine print somewhere in the contract that makes it so hard for you to either break the contract, or, you know, in case you have fire damage, some places you might see a fire detector, but that doesn't work. Like, this is a true story. This happened to one of my friends where, you know, their whole apartment almost burnt down because his next door neighbor left something on the hob, and then none of the alarms went off, and the fire brigade came and they were like, yo, you know, what's going on? So honestly, do your research, ask friends, ask sisters, brothers, people, like just anyone, you know, if they know anything about different agencies, you'll be able to hear something and make a very informed decision. In addition, with private homes, like I've heard so many horror stories. One advice I'd give is to take pictures after you move out. So with this, usually with private housing, usually put down a deposit. So this can be anything from £200. Like I've seen places where the deposit is like £800 or something like that. And a deposit is basically placed down so that when you move out, if you've left like some, you know, damage in the room, the landlord can actually fix whatever you've damaged. That's what it is basically. And sometimes I've had friends whereby, you know, they've not taken pictures and everything, and then they get a bill after they've moved out, and then the landlord is like, oh, I washed the carpet because it was a big stain, and that bill to wash the carpet is like £100, and you're like, excuse me, what were you doing for £100? Like, what? And you know, this is how people lose their deposit, or they end up with a smaller deposit. So I think it's very important for you to take pictures, because if you don't have pictures, there's no way you can prove that you actually left the house the way it was when you began. Also, for most private accommodations, they have the option of you paying money in full, or if you want to pay per term, you usually need a guarantor. So a guarantor is a UK resident that, you know, has lived here for some time, has credit, you know, has a permanent address, so that if you don't pay your rent, the landlord or the agency can go and hunt someone down. Because, you know, if you're an international student like some of us, you can easily just run away without paying the rest of the year's rent. With this bit, I use my uncle. Honestly, if you've got any family members, it's just putting down a signature. I would highly recommend you ask them, or even just have a chat with accommodations, because sometimes they're actually willing to listen to you. Or you can show a bank statement. Some people are really nice. They'll be like, okay, yeah, you know, we can see that your parents have this money and you won't run away, and you know you're doing a degree, etc, and you'd be able to pay term per term if you feel like paying the whole rent at one go is a lot. So yeah, that's just a snippet of private accommodation. If you guys have any questions, guys, please put them in the comment section below. At this point, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. You know, if you've liked the hard work that has gone into making this video. And don't forget to head over to the part 2 of this video, where we continue talking about accommodation, and we also have a room tour of how a studio apartment looks like. So yeah, See you there, guys. Bye.